is Robin Altman. I'm the founder of Radiate Coaching, and thanks so much for joining me today. As promised, I'm going to share 3 important insights about your inner critic to get you unstuck and moving toward your goal. Now, this webinar is the recorded version of a talk I gave at our quarterly open house at Adler Graduate Professional School for Coaching, and it's based on a book I'm just finishing entitled Silence Your Inner Critic and Reach Your Full Potential. Create the life of your dreams doing work that you love. So if you're interested, at the end of this webinar, I'll cover off what you'll find in the book. And if you're subscribed to the Radiate community, which I believe you are if you're accessing this webinar, you'll be one of the first few to get your free copy of the book when I launch. So, the inner critic. You may already know it. It's that little voice in our head that plays the same dialogue over and over again like a recording, oftentimes cutting us down, threatening our self-confidence, and ultimately preventing us from having what we truly want for ourselves. As I listen to my clients of all ages and stages over the years, so often the one thing that stands in their way more than anything else is not how much they actually know, or how capable or talented they are, or what the external circumstances are, but in fact their own inner critic causing self-doubt. Now, I myself struggled with my inner critic in a big way for many years of my life. And I'm going to share some of that experience with you today as well as in the book. But first, I want to make this time you're spending with me today really worth your while and have you experience this from a more personal perspective. So in that vein, I'd like to invite you to grab a pen and paper or pull up a blank page in a new document on your computer so that you can take notes. You may even pause this recording to do that. And once you have something to write on, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes and take a couple of slow breaths and think of something you want for yourself. Something that you dream of or that you're striving for. Now don't hold back here. Think of something that you're really yearning for. If you could have anything, what would it be? If you could become anything or achieve anything, what would that be? And if you like, you can even pause the recording again and write it down. I'd like to invite you to hold on to this deep yearning as I share 3 insights about our inner critic. And I hope that this could be useful, either in supporting you to continue along the path of achieving this goal with momentum, or if you're chomping at the bit for something but haven't yet started, I hope that this can provide a springboard for your first step. And now, we're ready to get started. For insight number 1, we need to go back to the origins of the inner critic. Our inner critic started out as a brand new blank slate. Like all of the other organs in our body, the inner critic is a built-in function provided at birth, ready for programming. It's like buying a brand new mobile device and opening it up to its factory settings. When we're infants, the world is a new and exciting place, ripe for exploration. We see something attractive, we reach for it or move toward it. We're not concerned about the dangers that stand in our way. We're invincible. Until one of our caregivers pulls us back and sings a warning to us. Where do you think you're going? No, stay here. That's a fishbowl. And if you pull at it, you'll spill all the water and the fish will go along with it too. Sometimes our caregiver isn't around, and that's when we learn these lessons for ourselves through experience. Think of an adventurous toddler who puts his hand in a doorway as it's closing. Ouch! You can imagine the pain he must feel. This is where the inner critic comes in. It stores the information as putting hand in door equals pain. We may not have the words for it yet, but now we have this inner rudder that keeps us away from closing doors. As we grow up, the voice of our inner critic can be programmed not only by experiences with well-meaning parents and caregivers, but by anyone that we deem important in our lives. If our teacher told us that we're not smart, then our inner critic may have adopted a belief that we're not smart. You see, anytime we hear something from an influential source, whomever they may be to us personally, especially repeatedly, or anytime we have an emotionally charged experience, our inner critic is on standby, ready for programming. What happens as we go through life is that our inner critic amalgamates all these lessons, new beliefs, and ways of thinking about ourselves into little bits of internal dialogue, all in the name of keeping us safe. Our inner critic's programming is super efficient, just like a computer's. Once it's there, it operates with precision by matching data in the outside world to the stored data from past experiences and interactions, detecting danger based on that match, setting off warning signals, and shifting us into gear to resolve the situation. Anytime we repeatedly react to similar situations in the same way and receive the same result, our inner critic is reinforced. Our inner critic is part of our life's navigation system, or GPS if you will. It's designed to put the brakes on just like the brakes of a car, which are meant to be used to have us yield from moving forward when we see threat or danger until we're able to assess and move ahead safely. So as you can see, the inner critic is specifically designed for survival, which is supposed to be a good thing. The problem arises when the inner critic mismatches, distorts, or misinterprets situations as dangerous, and especially when it draws conclusions about our abilities and potential, or it judges our self-worth or identity based on its experiences. This is when the inner critic can take over and work to our detriment, limiting our courage to take risks, try new things, expand our capabilities, enhance our self-concept, create change, and follow our dreams. You see, the inner critic takes over when it indiscriminately applies its learning to people and situations where it is not merited. Before we're aware that there's such a thing as an inner critic, it can be quite sneaky, and its voice can just sound like the truth. We hear it, and because we think it, we may not even question it. In fact, the inner critic's voice usually operates in our subconscious and activates in the blink of an eye way before we even consciously know it's speaking. A story from my own life. As a child, I was a strong performer. Whether it was dancing, acting, or presenting, it seemed I was a natural. But at 9 years old, all that changed when I was called up in class to give a presentation. It wasn't a difficult one. It was just something that we were asked to think about and report on. As I began to speak, my hands started trembling, so much so that I could barely see the words on the page I was holding. I ended my talk as quickly as I could, of course, and the kids laughed at me, and I felt a lot of shame. And from then on, I was programmed to avoid the spotlight, even if I earned it. I faithfully gave over all the presenting and performing duties to others to avoid having an extreme physical reaction that I predicted would end in humiliation and shame. But there were some situations that were unavoidable, and because my inner critic was operating without my knowledge, the experiences ended up, again, faithfully matching these predictions, which only served to reinforce my inner critic's credibility and make its voice even louder. Here's an example. In my 20s and 30s, as director of communications at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival, I always declined requests for media interviews and referred them to others in the organization, even if it would have been very appropriate for me to do some of these interviews myself. My inner critic would shout loudly, "No, don't do it. You don't want to get nervous and make a fool of yourself again, would you? Even worse, imagine how embarrassing it would be for the festival if you were to flub it. Besides, There are plenty of other people who could speak for the festival. It's not really your place anyway. And I always found someone else on our team who was more than happy to take on those duties. Then, in my 10th year, during one of the biggest events of the festival, my boss very thoughtfully orchestrated a surprise special acknowledgement for me in front of 2,300 people in the audience and multiple cameras rolling. Little did he know it would launch me into panic, but that's exactly what happened. My body started convulsing, and I just couldn't stand there. I had to run off stage. To add insult to injury, a top Canadian comic who I knew came up to me after the show that night and said, "Robin, that tribute was one of the worst things I've ever seen." And he wasn't joking. I can laugh about it now, but of course I was crushed. It was only many years later, after I learned about my inner critic, that I was able to finally heal from the experience. Simply being able to articulate and acknowledge that I had an inner critic was an aha moment, because it meant that this voice telling me that I couldn't speak in public wasn't telling the truth. It was actually making a false match, a false prediction. This voice was separate from the real me, and that in itself was a revelation. With this in mind, and thinking back to the origin of this a little differently, to my presentation in the classroom when I was 9, what if my hands were shaking because I was dehydrated? Or what if I didn't eat my Wheaties for breakfast that day? Or what if I was having a particularly difficult time at school during that period and feeling a little awkward? Or what if it's true that my hands were shaking, but that this didn't mean anything anyway? There could have been many reasons why my hands were shaking in that moment, reasons that had nothing to do with my true ability. But here's the thing. Imagine how many interviews and opportunities I gave up all those years just because I listened to my inner critic. I'll never know the answer to that myself, but the point is that my mere interpretations, assumptions, and beliefs led me to make major career impacting decisions based on faulty inner dialogue and nothing else. And that's the power of the inner critic. It can become destructive and debilitating, and it can ruin many years of our lives if gone unchecked. So soon after I discovered and named my inner critic, I was able to end over 30 years of stage fright. Over the years since, I've been able to present in front of countless groups of all sizes, and it's a part of my work that I love. Now, don't get me wrong, my inner critic still speaks, and I still need to manage it, just like everyone else. But I'm aware of the words I say to myself, and I consciously work to choose ones that move me forward. Our inner critic is a function we all have, designed not to put us down or destroy us, but to put the brakes on, just like the brakes of a car. And it's meant to be used to have us slow down or stop us from moving forward in the face of real threat or danger. But it's not meant to paralyze us. It's merely a signal of caution to have us course correct. So if your inner critic is having you slow down or yield in order to course correct and move forward towards your deep yearning, then it's doing its job. But if your inner critic is cutting you down and paralyzing you, it's made a mismatch. So when we feel stuck, we take pause to hear our inner critic and challenge the matches it's making instead of just believing. In this way, we start loosening the grip keeping us from moving forward. So as you think about your deep yearning, ask yourself, how has my inner critic limited me from moving forward? What is it telling me about myself, about this situation? Is my inner critic making an accurate match? If I could get over my inner critic, what's possible? How important is it for me to address this right now? How long am I willing to go on without taking action? How committed am I to this deep yearning or to this goal? So insight number 1, our inner critic is part of our life GPS meant to keep us safe, but it can make a mismatch. When our inner critic is keeping us safe, it's doing its job. When it makes a mismatch, it can keep you stuck. Insight number 2. There are times when a current life event or experience can trigger not only your inner critic's voice about the current situation, but deeper emotional pain such as unresolved hurt, grief, anguish, and or anger from a past experience as well. These triggers can sometimes stem from old, deeply ingrained memories and pain from an original experience in childhood. For example, someone who had a learning disability in elementary school might say, "Even though I'm over it today and quite successful, I can still feel like the least intelligent person in the room." Sometimes our triggers can be linked to an abusive parent. They might say, "My mom was always calling me names and putting me down. As an adult, I understand that my extreme sensitivity and never good enough obsession definitely comes from her disapproval." When it's not only about the current situation, but also a reminder of a painful past experience, our inner critic's emotional impact can become more intense and almost exaggerated in relation to the current triggering situation. This is because, in the end, it's not only about the present anymore, it's also about the unhealed original past pain too. It's a common human experience for triggers of the past to come up later in life. Eckhart Tolle, in his book A New Earth, tells us that when our emotional pain from past hurts or wounds is not soothed by a loving parent or tended to by our own self-love in the moment, but dismissed or buried instead, it sticks to the cells of our bodies, just like physical matter. This unhealed, unresolved pain lies inside us and grows anytime similar stimuli or events are experienced or triggered in the present moment. Sometimes it could even feel as though we're reliving the pain from the original experience. When past pain is involved, this may go beyond the scope of the inner critic and move into the territory of psychotherapy. That's because we first learn how to soothe our emotional pain from our primary caregivers. Many psychologists believe that we ultimately come to treat ourselves the way we were treated by our parents as children. We love the parts of ourselves that our parents or caregivers loved, and we reject the parts of ourselves that our parents rejected. If our parents turned away from us for feeling bad, then we could have learned to feel shame for our bad feelings. If our parents criticized us, then we could have learned to feel shame for who we are. If our parents dismissed or ignored our needs, then we could have learned that we don't matter. Ultimately, we're programmed to love ourselves the way our parents loved us. So, some of us could find it difficult as adults to comfort ourselves, self-soothe, and be self-compassionate in the moment instead of allowing self-loathing and pain to take over. While many of us may have had a good upbringing, we can all bear past hurts or wounds that haunt us. The question is how bad the pain feels personally, how often these triggers come up, and what the impact is on our life. Most importantly is how these triggers make us feel about ourselves, our ability to self-soothe, and the personal toll they take on our mental health and well-being. So, going back to the inner critic, when we don't know how to love ourselves, our inner critic's voice can get loud and cut deep and become an attack on our personal identity and self-worth. And sadly, our world is filled with people who don't love themselves. Now, it's become cliche when we say you have to love yourself. We hear it all the time, but what does that really mean? Well, my personal definition is showing unwavering appreciation, understanding, care, compassion, and emotional support for myself in the bad times as much as the good, unconditionally. Being in tune with my emotional and physical needs, and taking responsibility to ensure that I personally take care to fulfill them. Loving ourselves is especially tested when things don't go as planned or when we experience rejection. For example, when we have a bad email exchange, or we say the wrong thing at a party, or we have an argument with a loved one, or we arrive somewhere late, or our project fails, or we make a mistake, or we didn't get that promotion, or we didn't connect with that person, or we received negative feedback from clients, or we didn't win that competition. In these cases, we love ourselves by being self-compassionate and self-soothing in situation after situation, event after event, over the long term. Without self-love, our inner critic's voice can give us such an intense emotional charge that it feels more like an attack on our entire identity than a mere critique of a situation. It can distort our perspective and have us drowning in our own shame instead of being our naturally resourceful selves. Brené Brown explains this resulting feeling of shame as the difference between saying, I did something wrong, and I am wrong. The former, I did something wrong, is a reasonable adult reflection based on behavior, based on the doing. I did something wrong, I feel guilt. And a little bit of guilt is okay when it keeps us honest and true to ourselves and doing the right thing, and then we course correct. However, the latter, I am wrong, is placing a label on our personal identity. I did something wrong, therefore I am wrong, I am defective. This refers to the being of us. Without self-love, our obstacles become labels defining how we see ourselves as a person and our overall self-worth. We think things like, I lost that bid, I'm such a loser. Or, I fell, I'm so weak. Or, I wasn't invited, no one likes me. The impact of these thoughts can be crushing and far-reaching, stopping us in our tracks, having us lose momentum, abandoning goals, even damaging our relationships, or never realizing our dreams. So ask yourself, how do I treat myself in the tough times? Now, this is not to say that we excuse our bad behavior or that we don't try to develop and become a better version of ourselves. Of course we do. But we do this through the door of self-love, not through the door of self-loathing and shame. Our self-love is the life jacket that can save or buoy us from our shame. Self-love keeps our inner critic in check, doing its rightful job, which is to alert us to danger and have us slow down or stop long enough to reflect on the situation, course correct, learn and grow, and continue moving forward with success. When we love ourselves, we may think, oh, that didn't feel good. I'm sad and disappointed about it. It's okay to feel this way, obviously, given the situation. I guess I'm going to need to take a look at what happened here and see if I can understand. I might even need to take some time and mourn the loss. But one thing I know for sure is that I have good intentions and I am a good person. And if I made a mistake, I'll figure it out and correct it. I'll learn for next time. When we have self-love, the inner critic's voice can be taken for what it's meant to be, a healthy navigation function that we all possess, which alerts us to real and reasonable dangers so that we can assess, course correct, and take appropriate action on our way to achieving our goals and dreams. This change in mindset from self-attack to self-love is one of the most important personal gifts and shifts that we can give ourselves. Why? Because when we love ourselves, we just feel better. And when we feel better, we're more resourceful. We take responsibility, but the intense emotional charge isn't quite as high or prolonged, which means that we can get back up again and move forward toward our goal. Self-love gives us a more adaptive way of dealing with our inner critic, with our relationships to others, and to life's challenges in general. So as you reflect on your deep yearning or goal, and the inner critic's voice you hear jabbering away, how much of what it's saying is matching the current situation, and how much of what it's saying is exaggerating the current situation, potentially connecting it to past unresolved hurt? Ask, do I have emotional pain from the past that impacts the way I feel about myself today? Does this past emotional pain amplify and distort my inner critic's voice when I'm reaching for a goal or when things don't go my way? What are the impacts of this emotional pain? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I love myself? On a scale of 1 to 10, how adept am I at soothing myself in the tough times? Insight number 2. Our self-love is the life jacket that can save or buoy us from our shame and let our inner critic do its job. Self-love keeps our inner critic in check and gives us resilience. So, we've talked about the inner critic being the brakes on our forward movement, but wouldn't it be a sad state of affairs if that's all our GPS consisted of? That would be like designing a car with great brakes that never goes anywhere. And of course that's absurd. So if our inner critic is the brakes, then what propels us forward? Some might say, well, my inner ally moves me forward, or my self-confidence, or my authentic self. Well, there's something that I believe is even more powerful that actually encompasses all those things and more, and that's our purpose. If the inner critic is the brakes, our purpose is the gas pedal that moves us toward our goals and dreams. Now, being on purpose may seem like some ethereal or mystical concept that takes years to crack, but in reality, it's simply something that eludes us when we're consumed by the day-to-day trials and tribulations of life. To give you an idea of what it means to be on purpose, I'd like to do a little exercise that will have you remembering an experience of it in your own life. So, think of an activity that you really love to do. It could be anything, like playing an instrument or a sport or cooking. It can be what you do for work if you love it. Or it could also be an activity as simple as walking the dog or organizing a dinner party or working out. It doesn't have to be something that you do well. It just needs to be something that you love to do. Now you may pause the recording for a few moments if you like, and reflect on some of the feelings that come up when you're engaging in this activity. Surely they're very positive. You might say it brings you joy, or has you feeling at peace, or gives you pure focus, or a feeling of flow and fulfillment. Whatever that activity is, if you love doing it and it brings out the best in you, you can say that you're on purpose during the times that you engage in it. The feeling that you get is what it feels like to be on purpose. Imagine that when you're on purpose, you're being your authentic self, at your best, engaging in an activity or a goal that's deeply meaningful to you. You're able to leverage your unique strengths and other attributes in service of these goals. There's a natural quality to your way of being without feelings of self-consciousness. This is the you that you are when no one's judging, not even you. As you continue to think about what it's like to engage in your favorite activity. Imagine all of the feelings that come up. When we're on purpose, we're clear, confident, empowered, and hopeful. We're resourceful, uninhibited, and focused. Our energy and impact radiate positive light all around us, and we create a beautiful glow experienced by others. Being on purpose is something that we want to live all the time and every day of our life. Now, you may be saying, yeah, that sounds great, Robin, but isn't that a little idealistic? Well, when we're on purpose, we still experience problems, roadblocks, and challenges along the way, and we can still get angry or sad. These are all aspects of what it means to be human, after all. But the difference is that we're not paralyzed or crushed by challenge, and instead optimistic and confident about our ability to transcend. Essentially, when we're on purpose, we rise to the occasion. We move with passion and determination towards goals that have deep meaning for us, no matter how daunting or hard they are. We may fall down, but we get back up because we're connected to a bigger vision of what we want for ourselves and to what's important to us. Challenges and problems fit into a bigger story that we tell ourselves about ourselves, which gives them meaning and perspective and purpose. It's like an athlete who trains for years and years, day in, day out, every day, and finally wins the gold and says, it was hard work and sacrifice, but it was worth every minute of it. To illustrate what I mean even further, think of an acorn. In its embryonic state, it's hard to imagine an acorn blossoming into anything much, but all that DNA consolidated into one small acorn has the potential to grow into a sprawling natural beauty of a tree. And the same goes for each of us. We are each an ever-evolving, ever-growing living organism with all its DNA mapped inside of it. With the proper amount of sunlight, water, and natural elements around us, we have the potential to blossom and thrive in ways we could not have imagined. Our purpose is made up of all our unique attributes, as well as our accumulated experiences, knowledge, mindset, attitudes, and state of being that make up who we are at our best in this moment. But it doesn't stop there. Just like the acorn, it's also made up of our full potential. It includes the inner wisdom that guides us to self-express, expand, and grow in our process of becoming a better, more mature, and fully realized version of ourselves. It's an inner intelligence, just like the one that keeps our heart and lungs pumping and ultimately keeps us breathing. It may speak more quietly and softly and operate beneath the surface of our consciousness, yet this inner knowing is elevated beyond logic, guiding us if we were to just tap into it. Because being on purpose means becoming our true and most authentic best self, being on purpose provides confidence, meaning, and intention to all of our life experiences and ultimately leads to our greatest levels of happiness and fulfillment. So going back to the inner critic again, here's a diagram to illustrate the relationship between the inner critic and our purpose. We begin at a starting point and look forward toward our goal or dream. When our inner critic is loud and paralyzing, it takes control and keeps us stuck at the starting line. When our purpose is louder, it takes control and moves us forward. Being on purpose, we embody our true selves, unencumbered by self-doubt and indecision, moving toward a goal that's deeply meaningful to us. The louder our purpose and the quieter our inner critic, the more momentum we gain. One of my very first clients was a production coordinator in the film business. Now, film production in general is a high-stress job. One day on set, an actor called in sick and there was no one to replace her. But the shoot had to happen anyway because they hired a horse, which is super expensive to do on films. The actor was supposed to ride the horse for one scene. So because the shoot had to go on, they asked my client if she'd be willing to stand in for this absent actor, given their resemblance. But my client had a tremendous fear of horses, and this normally would have deterred her from going anywhere near the horse, even as it was delivered on set. But because the entire production would have been held up, my client knew that her help would be critical. And without even thinking, she rose to the occasion, calmly going through all the preparations and filming atop that horse over several hours and nailing the scene. My client stepped up because for her, being on purpose meant giving of herself for her team in crisis. And this strong sense of purpose, meaning, and service had her just naturally focusing on the goal rather than being overcome by the fear of her inner critic's voice. So as you can see, part of managing your inner critic is to divert your attention away from it and connect to other more powerful parts of you that will facilitate your forward movement. When you're able to name and articulate your purpose, you're accessing these powerful parts. Discovering and articulating our purpose can be helpful in silencing our inner critic and creating the change in our life that moves us to realize our full potential. That's because when we're on purpose in our lives, we see a connection between all of our life experiences, as if they tell a story in our personal film of becoming. In tough times when our inner critic can be front and center, the idea of overcoming challenges has more meaning for us. And despite the hardship, we still see ourselves as an ever-evolving, ever-growing being who has the ability to cope and adjust in many ways. We see our ability to become a better and more authentic version of ourselves as a journey. In other words, when we're on purpose, we recognize that we're in the process of becoming who we're really meant to be. And that's exactly what it was for me personally in overcoming my stage fright and fear of public speaking. For most of my adult life, I couldn't justify why I would want or need to do anything about it. But once I woke up to my deep desire to become a successful coach, I thought to myself, what would it be like to keep my messages to myself for the rest of my life instead of putting them out into the world? What will make me feel most proud of myself and fulfilled? You see, for me, there was so much meaning wrapped up into being able to put myself out there. I could share my message and knowledge and directly help other people have better lives. This became so important to me that I was ready to do anything I could to overcome my fear. I knew that if I didn't overcome it, I would squander the life I was meant to live. Instead, connecting to my purpose gave me courage, motivation, strength, and resilience, just like my client who got up on that horse. And from there, I became 100% motivated and determined to overpower my inner critic. And that's when I finally put a plan in place. You may not be able to articulate your purpose precisely right now, but you may have a good idea of how you're feeling about your life. A good test is to ask yourself how you feel about different areas like your work and professional life, your relationship with family and friends, your health, your outlook about your future with any goals you may have, and any other aspects of your life that are important to you. As you think about these different areas, what do you see? What's the overall feeling you get about your life? What looks good? What feels good? What areas could use attention? Do you see any themes? If your overall outlook about your life is good and you feel an alignment with who you are and what fulfills you, you may already be on purpose without even knowing it. In this case, discovering and articulating your purpose may simply be great as a validation that you're on the right track and as a way to keep you there. If, on the other hand, there are areas that give you pause, or where you want more for yourself, or where you have a deep yearning but are stunted by fears standing in your way of moving forward, it may be helpful to do a deeper dive. Being on purpose provides clarity, direction, strength, and resilience, especially when we're looking to break through the limitations that our inner critic sets for us. When we're on purpose and challenged by our inner critic, we may say something like, "This may be difficult, but I am so meant to overcome this obstacle. Look at all of the positive impact that it will have on myself and on others. Look how great I'll feel if I'm able to overcome." So as you can see, being connected to our purpose not only helps us move our life in the right direction with energy and momentum, but it helps us get out of our own way and even achieve what we think is impossible. Insight number 3. The more on purpose we are in life, the quieter our inner critic. If the function of our inner critic is the brakes, the function of our purpose is the gas pedal. Ask, how clear are you on your sense of purpose? As you think about your deep yearning or goal, how does it fit into your purpose in life? Imagine what it could feel like to be on purpose. What could that do for you moving toward your goal? If all the obstacles moved out of your way, who would you be in this life? What would you accomplish? How important is it for you to accomplish these things? So let's go back and review. Insight number 1, our inner critic is part of our life GPS, meant to keep us safe. But it can make a mismatch. When our inner critic is keeping us safe, it's doing its job. When it makes a mismatch, it can keep us stuck. Insight number 2, our self-love is the life jacket that can save or buoy us from our shame and let our inner critic do its job. Self-love keeps our inner critic in check and gives us resilience. Insight number 3, the more on purpose we are in life, the quieter our inner critic. If the function of our inner critic is the brakes, the function of our purpose is the gas pedal. Final questions to ask. What have I learned about my inner critic from this webinar? What am I taking away into my life from this? What does this learning or insight motivate me to do going forward? If I were to commit to one small step toward my deep yearning, what would it be? What would this commitment do for me? What am I ready to commit to or promise myself right now? How will I hold myself accountable? What structures can I put in place to keep the momentum going? I hope that going through these exercises are going to be useful for you in starting to challenge your inner critic and move towards your deep yearning and your goal. As I mentioned earlier, this is just a summary of what you can look forward to finding in the book that I'm going to be launching very soon. And the title of that book again is Silence Your Inner Critic and Reach Your Full Potential. Create the life of your dreams, doing work that you love. Now, as promised, let me share a little bit about what you can expect to find in this book. Above and beyond what I've covered today, you will find 7 lessons about your brain that will dispel any doubt that you can change your most deeply ingrained thinking and embed a more resourceful, optimistic, and enthusiastic mindset so that you can find more joy and fulfillment in every day. Tools to identify your own inner critic and what it's specifically saying to you so that you can recognize it in the moment. Steps to manage your inner critic, as well as a reprogramming menu, including techniques and practices to target your inner critic's dialogue and change your thinking permanently. How to use your inner critic to move forward. How to digest even the harshest feedback. When our inner critic can collide with past pain, and what to do about it. What self-love means, and how to practice it. And finally, stories and examples to illustrate these concepts so that you can see all the opportunity that lies ahead, and so much more. I want to take a moment to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to review this webinar today. I sincerely hope that something in here will allow you to move more swiftly towards your deep yearning, your goals and dreams. I hope that you will stay connected with me in the future through my Radiate community or even directly. You can reach me at Robin with an I at radiatecoaching.com. You can review my website on discovering your personal brand and purpose at www.radiatepassionandpurpose.com. And you can also look at my website, www.radiatecoaching.com. Thank you again. Wish you the best of luck and hope to see you real soon. Bye for now.